So what I'm about to tell you will allow you to perform better in all forms of exercise. And it is not commonly known, unfortunately. I'm here to try and change that. You actually can make a doubling of your dips, or believe it or not, a tripling or quadrupling or more of your pull-ups fairly straightforward. Put simply, if you get too hot, you stop exercising. You may not even realize it, but your will to exercise further, your ability to push harder, is entirely dependent on the heat of the muscle, both locally and your whole system. AVAs allow more heat to leave the body more quickly and more cool to enter the body more quickly than other venous, arterial, capillary beds throughout the body. In other words, you can heat up best at the face, the palms, and the bottoms of the feet, and you can cool down best at the face, the palms, and the bottoms of the feet than you can anywhere else on your body. And when I say heat up or cool down, I mean actually heat or cool the core and your brain. Okay? So this is vitally important. I realize we're getting down into the mechanistic weeds here, but you need to know that these three compartments of your body, palms, bottoms of feet, and face, are your best leverage points for manipulating temperature to vastly improve physical performance. Cooling the palms, palmar cooling, allowed people, athletes, and recreational athletes to run much further, to lift more weight, and to do more sets and reps to a absolutely staggering degree. Let's talk for a second a bit more about why we stop, why we shut off effort when we get too hot. Because in doing so, you'll really understand how and why the best protocols exist for being able to do more work, to be able to exercise longer, and actually to feel good doing it. You actually can make a doubling of your dips, or believe it or not, a tripling or quadrupling or more of your pull-ups fairly straightforward. I mentioned before that when muscle heats up, enzymes start getting disrupted, and ATP in muscles can't work so well, and those muscles can't contract. Let's get a little more specific about that. The enzyme that's involved here is something called pyruvate kinase. And pyruvate kinase is essentially a rate-limiting step. It's a critical step that you can't bypass if you want muscles to contract, and it's very temperature sensitive. Therefore, if you can keep temperature lower, you can do more work per unit time. You can do more pull-ups, and that actually was done by Craig and his colleagues. What they essentially did is they brought someone into their laboratory who could do 10 pull-ups on the first set, and they were able to get 10, rest 2 or 3 minutes, get another 10, rest 2 or 3 minutes, and if you've ever tried this, what you find is that you start dropping to 8, 7, 6, etc. Now, the person might not necessarily feel like they're overheating, but the muscle is heating up. Then, with their knowledge that these AVAs, that these portals in the palms are a great way to both heat the body, but also to dump heat from the body, they used a device, and I'll talk about what you can do at home, but a device where they had people hold on to what was essentially a cold tube. Now, this is crucial. The tube can't be so cold that it causes vasoconstriction, because then the cold won't pass from the tube to the hand and to the core. But if it's the right temperature, it's neither too hot nor too cold, that cool from the cold tube passes into the hand, these so-called palmar regions, and then cools the core, and in theory, by lowering body temperature, would allow the person or the athlete to do more work. And indeed, that's what they saw. The actual data, the specific data, showed that subjects could do, at least the subjects they worked with, on their first day with no cooling, about 100 pull-ups across the time frame that they had. Okay, so it might have taken anywhere from 10 to 15 or maybe more sets, depending on how skilled that person was, but in a fixed amount of time. Then they came back and did the cooling. They did it the very next day, which if you've ever trained a muscle the very next day, typically you wouldn't do as well in its training if it took any damage from the previous session, or you at least do as well, but you probably wouldn't do what they then observed, which was they started cooling after every other set. The person would just hold the cold tube, cool down the body after every other set, rest, everything else was kept the same. And they found that they went to 180 pull-ups, which is incredible. And they found a near doubling. And by doing this repeatedly over several sessions, over several weeks, they quickly went in the cooling group from a maximum of somewhere between 180 and 200, as I recall, I'm sort of estimating now, to 600 pull-ups in the equivalent amount of time, which is absolutely incredible. They then repeated this in a study on the bench press. And actually, the bench press study was pretty interesting because they actually had a control group that was admittedly taking specific amounts of anabolic steroids. The anabolic steroid was testosterone cypionate, which is essentially testosterone. And indeed, the testosterone cypionate, the steroid group, improved at a rate of about 1% per week. There were differences. And the cooling group basically left all other groups in the dust. It was just remarkable. So cooling the core, I want to be very clear that it's not cooling the muscle. It wasn't about cooling the chest alone or just cooling the palms. It was about allowing cold to pass through the palms because of the unique vasculature that's there, these AVAs, allowed these subjects to do far more work per unit time. And the important thing is that if they were to come back after doing 600 pull-ups or 500 pull-ups, you might say, well, wow, that's going to create a situation where recovery is going to be absolutely impossible. They could come back, not use the cooling, and they still saw a highly significant increase in the amount or the number of pull-ups or dips or bench press weight that they could do. Okay? So what that meant is that it was both an excellent performance and an excellent training stimulus that they were able to recover from. Okay. I don't know if all of you are following this, but these are the sorts of increases in exercise output that are absolutely staggering. And that's why professional teams and the military and others capitalized on them very quickly and use these.